In the Middle East, Jerusalem remains one of the most famous cities in the world. While politically controversial, Jerusalem has seen an intense presence of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity over thousands of years. Kings may come and go, demographics change, yet Jerusalem remains as the holiest city for Christians and Jews, and one of them for Muslims. Jerusalem, alongside cities such as Damascus, Tel Aviv, and Beirut, are critical to any study of the contemporary Middle East. Yet it is Jerusalem, and well, only Jerusalem, which has an intense Abrahamic quality. This is a city where Christianity, Islam, and Judaism come together in a way so unlike anywhere else. But the term I used, Abrahamic, is one with baggage, and frankly, one I mostly dislike. Chances are you've heard the term Abrahamic thrown around in religious studies textbooks, in conversations in the media about religion, in Middle Eastern studies, and of course, the many arguments about religion, both online and offline. The concept of Abrahamic religions is used by many Westerners to make sense of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, but it is a misleading term and has encouraged many falsehoods about the Middle East and the individual Abrahamic faiths. In my experiences online and in religious studies, the term Abrahamic religions is used to classify Islam, Judaism, and Christianity as a whole, and unfortunately, it's not uncommon to encounter phrases like Abrahamic morality and to see simplifications about the Middle East and monotheism. The word Abrahamic is used as a shorthand term to essentially imply desert monotheism, so unlike the other religions in the world. It's time to set the record straight and to explore the many flaws behind the Abrahamic religions terminology. I come at this from mostly a Christian perspective, but also as a historian and a journalist very much interested in the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe. To understand religion and the Middle East better, we must use more specific language and demonstrate awareness for the differences present among Christians, Jews, and Muslims. I will articulate my arguments and hopefully illuminate the differences between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Keep in mind though, that whilst I dislike the terminology of Abrahamic religions, I have nothing against diplomacy and good relations between Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Peace is a positive, of course it is, and something we should all strive towards. But for now, let's begin. I'm Madeleine Rose Jones, and I study history, literature, and culture. Welcome to Snowy Fictions. Internal diversity. First, I must stress that Judaism, Islam, and Christianity are distinct religions and have vast differences from one another. A Christian will see themselves as Christian and not in a wider religious framework with a Muslim. Whilst interfaith dialogue certainly exists, the differences between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity are so distinct, they are, well, different. We can discuss the differences in scripture, liturgy, iconography, history, and ways of worship all day. It's also important to note that these differences are just so distinct and real. They make the question of Abrahamic religions flawed and difficult. We must ask ourselves, does this term do a justice to the religions within it? Are we creating a connection between them that doesn't exist, except in our heads? Concepts will always have limitations, and Abrahamic religions are no different. Christians see themselves as Christians. Jews see themselves as Jews. Muslims see themselves as Muslims. There is simply no Abrahamic identity. The only possible exception historically is some Christians seeing Jews as them, just not the Old Testament. There are some communities of Christians who believe Jews are chosen and have a special role in the world. When studying Islamic history, the early period was contextualized by the Latin West as a Mohammedan heresy and seen through a Christian gaze. And in Islam, Jesus is a prophet, and this carries significance. If we look closer at the Quran, we can find numerous verses about Christians and Christian affairs. This raises an important point about how religions are often shaped by the view of others, and scripture as well as traditions are never formed in isolation, which just adds to my frustration about the Abrahamic classification. It leads to a heavy focus on the links between Christianity, Islam, and Judaism that at times the term can exclude the influence of other religious traditions. In my video about comparative religion, Louise Perry's thesis on repaganizing and Christianity's link to progressive ideology, I emphasized the role Greco-Roman religion had in shaping Christian philosophy, liturgy, and sacred space. And it's true, Christianity came out of antiquity, a time dynamic with so many religions and philosophical traditions across Eurasia. In addition, there's plenty of good research about the influence of ancient Arabian religion onto Islam. For those interested in art history, you could consider the aesthetic representation of Islamic scripture and philosophy in, say, early modern South Asia. Jewish history also reveals contacts with faiths other than Christianity and Islam too, particularly in East Asia and among Persians prior to Islam. Good religious studies means questioning the conceptive frameworks we use, and this is what my problem with Abrahamic religions ultimately is. I have no problem whatsoever with the individual faiths themselves, but how they are conceptualized and the context they are viewed in. The differences between the Abrahamic faiths is also evident in the role Abraham plays. In Judaism, Abraham is the founding father between Jews and God, thus marking the special covenant. But Christianity and Islam offer a different story. Christianity stresses as an original marker, thus tying Christianity into ancient Jewry and its traditions. We can tell from this that Christianity has always been a religion in dialogue with the old and the new. Abraham and his role in Christianity is proof of this. Islam takes a chronological view, as Abraham is in the link of prophets between Adam and Muhammad. From this, we can understand the Abrahamic faiths as all placing importance on Abraham, but interpreting him in different ways and offering different contexts. Overall, I ask that we stress the internal diversity within the Abrahamic context and understand the differences between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. The myth of Abrahamic morality. There's a term I've seen online, and it's Abrahamic morality, the implication being that not only are there meaningful ties between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, but this extends to morality. These three faiths are monotheistic and stress the oneness and completeness of God. He is not only the creator, but in charge of moral law. Consequently, the behavior and mindset of adherents to the Abrahamic faiths is shaped by this belief. Abraham himself best embodies this view. In the Old Testament, Abraham is commanded by God to sacrifice his son Isaac. Abraham submits to God's command and prepares, but only for God to substitute a ram for Isaac, thus permitting the son to live as a reward for Abraham's loyalty. We can learn several trends here present in the Abrahamic faiths. The reward for loyalty, God's mercy and grace, and the need to trust God, the powerful creator. This perception, when simplified, of the Abrahamic faiths nearly always comes from outsiders or from apparently neutral parties like online educators. Out of the three arguments I present in this video, this is the most niche aspect because in fairness, most are happy to concede that there are fundamental differences between the morality present in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Even those who use the term Abrahamic religions in their research and teachings avoid such an essentialist claim. Yet there is a loud minority, mostly online, who associate the Abrahamic faiths with a slave-like dynamic between the believer and the creator. I'm not entirely unsympathetic to this interpretation, because all three, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are typically top-down and organized, and from a certain perspective, many adherents are giving their freedoms away. I can see why atheists take an issue with that in particular. But this is not unique to the Abrahamic religions. You find it in politics, philosophical schools, and across the world and in so many cultures. What is frequently labelled as Abrahamic is really part of human nature. In addition, there is no shared moral school among the Abrahamic faiths. In fact, when we look specifically at each religion, we notice so much diversity within them. Take Judaism. There are many different views and perspectives, with the caveat that history and the experiences of the Jewish people have shaped these opinions, as shown in Holocaust theology. Islam, beyond the Shia and Sunni division, has revealed core and very profound rivalries among the Middle East and North Africa in the last 2 centuries. The morality you find in Salafi jihadism is just too different to a more secular-minded individual in, say, Tajikistan. This is why we must always question when a Jew, a Christian, or a Muslim claim to represent everyone in that community. They can only ever represent aspects of it, moored in a specific time and geography. My criticisms of Abrahamic morality tie in nicely with my overall thesis about the terminology behind Abrahamic religions. It is just too broad and doesn't account for the internal diversity within, as well as the distinct and meaningful differences between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Misleading about the Middle East. The most prominent religion in the Middle East and North Africa today is Islam, obviously. Historically, the Middle East is utterly critical to Christianity and Judaism, with Jerusalem taking center stage. Yet, look closer to the Middle East, and there are countless other religions, like Zoroastrianism, the Druze, Sikhism, the Baha'i faith, and Mandaeism. Some, of course, classify as Abrahamic, such as the Druze, but we can certainly see the influence of Greco-Roman religion, Egyptian cults, and Near Eastern ancient faiths in the archaeology, whether it is in Palmyra, Dura Europos, or Petra, also known as the so-called caravan cities, where long-distance trade brought commercialization to these frontier societies. In Petra, we can find relics of the ancient Nabatean religion. Likewise, Palmyra shows syncretism between Hellenic and Near Eastern faiths. My point being, the religious history of the Middle East is not only fascinating, but so often transcends the Abrahamic categorization. But to those less informed about the Middle East and religion, Abrahamic essentially means Middle Eastern. This feeds into the view that the Middle East has only produced Abrahamic religions, which is just a disastrous way to view the ancient Near East. The Abrahamic religions term is a conceptual method to interpret world religion, and sure, we need boundaries. My argument also applies to other conceptual framings like Indian religion or the indigenous faiths in the Asia Pacific. But the Abrahamic framing does such a disservice to Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. All three have an intense presence outside of the Middle East. Each being well over 1,000 years old, the Abrahamic religions have gone into Europe, the Americas, East and South Asia, as well as Oceania. Whilst holy cities such as Mecca and Jerusalem are, of course, relevant to any discussion about Middle Eastern religion, we can also acknowledge the importance of Rome to Christianity, especially the Catholic Church. You cannot understand religion today without factoring in historical trends of globalism, warfare, imperialism, and trade. In the worst case scenario, Abrahamic religions is used as a shorthand to imply foreign or alien religions onto the indigenous populations of Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. This is less the case for Judaism, but I've certainly seen many European Christians being perceived as following a foreign religion. An example of this notion being used comes from Estonia in the 19th century, where nationalists portrayed Christianity as a foreign imposition. This is just so frustrating. Christianity is deeply rooted in Europe and has been for well over 1,000 years. European Christians are not lesser Europeans either, and nor should they be expected to forego their faiths to appease anyone. I'd also argue that religious experiences are still authentic and rooted, even if the religion was imposed on a population centuries prior, as was the case with the Baltic Crusades, especially Estonia and Latvia. This problem is not unique to Christianity either. Many Indonesian, Chinese, Turkish, and Persian Muslims are accused of following a religion imposed onto them. The implication is, of course, they are better off being pagans, secular, or polytheistic. But authenticity in religion is important, and from my perspective, an Indonesian Muslim shouldn't have to act a certain way to fit into our narrow categories of what a Muslim or an Indonesian should be like. Authentic religious practice stems from belief, belonging, and behavior, and both Islam and Christianity have built up traditions over centuries across the world. The Middle East will always matter, yes, to Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, but it's also vital to notice the many instances of these religions existing and well thriving outside the Levant. Conclusion. I must clarify that the term Abrahamic religions isn't entirely without merit. If you are a historian or a social scientist specifically interested in why monotheism succeeded in late antiquity and the Middle Ages, it is probably helpful to acknowledge the links between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's also true that any writing or research on Jerusalem will use an Abrahamic framing, and honestly, that's fine. I made this video not to deny any connection at all, but to question the overemphasis placed on the Abrahamic category in the modern era. When we discuss religion, especially monotheism and the faiths found in the Middle East, it's important to use more specific language and to not imply a connection that simply does not exist. But back to you. What are your thoughts on the term Abrahamic religions? Do you agree or disagree with the points I have raised? Comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts and start a discussion. Subscribe for frequent videos about history, literature, and culture. I also have a blog, a mailing list, and creative writing classes, all linked below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon. Goodbye for now.